and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian. The transformative technology of artificial intelligence is raising concern among some people, one of which is the effect it will have on the workforce. Some people are worried about being replaced by artificial intelligence and being left behind. How should we understand this phenomenon and what more could be done to address the challenges imposed by disruptive technologies such as AI? At this week's International Conference on AI Scientists being held in Beijing, I sought answers from James Heckman, winner of the Nobel Prize in Economic Sciences in the year 2000. Our conversation started with an intense debate he had with other Nobel laureates on the stage on what the fast development of AI means for human beings to understand better about themselves. How much do we know about AI? Is AI a reality, a potential, an aspiration, or, a legend?
First of all, there are many types of AI.
Indeed.
So you want to distinguish robots from what's called generative AI, which is a very recent development embodied by search engines or engines like DeepSeek or Grok or Claude or Anthropic. So what you've come with is a different tech. Before we had robots, we had lots of machines, computers were doing jobs, robots were taking out routine work in factories. But what we have now is something that's possibility much greater. And the reason is that it's able to do functions that we think of as normally associated with at least a certain level of human cognition and capacity. And so what's happened is that people are now seeing possibilities that weren't there before. So tasks, it's no longer just a question of putting a tire on a car, as with robots in the past. It's much more a question of saying, well, these machines, these devices can help people who are professionals, like lawyers, accountants, all kinds, librarians, you name it, do their jobs better. And in fact, in some cases, it may eliminate their demand for the job, but it may also enhance their demand for the job. And so in terms of the question you raised, does it necessarily lead to problems? No. It can lead to very beneficial solutions. But you're asking, what do we really know? It's early days. And the problem with the literature now, there's a lot of science fiction, a lot of people, and Hinton and some of these people, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, Henry Kissinger read a book with Eric Schmidt, I think it was, and they were worried about all the danger of the AI taking over the world. And, there's a logical possibility. It could be the machines will be very smart and do all these things we do. But what we really have come to understand is we don't really know what it is we do. The machines challenge us to define what's human and what's uniquely human and what's creative and what's not creative. So right now we're in the middle.
So in that sense, it makes much more sense.
Yes, but I think what's happening though is we have a much deeper uncertainty than we had in the past. It's an uncertainty about these machines and ourselves. What is it that makes us human and what's creative? We had a big discussion there about what was creative at the conference. And the problem with that discussion was that an idea of putting new things together that had never been put together before, some people weren't willing to call that creative, whereas it could be highly creative. And so there's an open question about, how much guidance we need. In AI, there's a distinction between supervised learning and unsupervised learning. Supervised learning, we have a very specific target. We teach a machine to do certain things. We supervise its goals. Now these machines are doing unsupervised learning. They're learning on their own. They're even learning to learn. And so, for example, today we were talking about code, software code, writing a code. AI can do software code. It can take the job of people whose job is to write software code to say, improve maybe a garage opener or maybe somebody driving a car or some other way. And so the question then becomes, we're now at this zone of exploration. We don't know. We really don't know. But I think approaching it with fear is a mistake.
But how to make this right balance? We've seen technologies evolving, and one could argue at every twist and turn, people have questions, maybe similar, maybe different to what we are having right now toward AI. But, what is this balance of not overestimate?
There are a lot of people who like to exaggerate. There's a lot of gain, especially now in the world of clicks and all kinds of social media presence. Making an exaggerated statement can be extremely, and so we say, oh, the world is going to be taken over by robots, or we're going to have this or that.
Not to mention the stock market.
Stock market, well, right now, what happened today? Do you know what happened? You know what happened yesterday? I don't even know.
It's been going down in terms
I know it's
of
gone
AI,
down for
the
a couple
concept, the overheating.
Well, but it's
quote,
been this whole discussion of circular trading.
Indeed.
Where you get NVIDIA and these other companies buying each other's shares, investing in each other. It does look like some kind of an inside game. But I think the speculation that's there is more real in the dot-com burst. And that is, there is a technology there. You see, that's where the uncertainty comes. So some people are very wildly optimistic about what the technology can do. The technology has to deliver, but it is starting to deliver, and it's delivered in some areas. So this is an exuberance that comes with markets. But it is an exuberance, and I don't think in this case that it really is a serious problem, that I do believe there's something real here with AI, and we are dealing with technologies. But you can see from the conversation at this conference today
Absolutely.
and yesterday that there's a lot of discussion that's unknown. People just don't know the parameters of what we are expecting and what we should expect. So I think that's an issue that needs to be resolved.
And these are leading thinkers in their own fields, whether they are Nobel laureates in physics, chemistry, and economics like yourself, and the
Right.
list goes on, or social economists also. So it seems that everybody is trying to think what exactly is going on.
Well, but first of all, because the terms aren't well defined. I was saying, AI is not just robotics, it's not just machine learning, it's not just computers in the office. It's not a better IT staff or a better typing capacity or ability to communicate. What it is now involving something that potentially involving the evolution of new ideas and new processes. So once you start getting into new ideas, something that's very dangerous, potentially dangerous, but also potentially very fruitful,
Indeed.
you're going to have a lot of divided opinion about which way to go with that.
Right, indeed.
And I think it's a mistake that people say, well, right now, there's a lot of fear that's going on now, thinking, well, the machine's going to take the place of people. That just isn't justified. And the way that people have measured this is crazy. It's literally incorrect. They're measuring what jobs are exposed, which occupations are exposed to AI, can use AI. That doesn't mean that this AI is going to take over. It just means that now this AI is useful in that occupation, and that can bolster the occupation, not shrink it. And that's what people are talking off the top of their heads. There isn't enough good data. And the measurement systems that many economists and other analysts are using is obsolete. It's based on a technology of the 1950s and 1960s and 70s. And it's not at all relevant to the new technology and the possibilities of creating new ideas, new organizational structures, new possibilities. I don't know them. I wish I could predict them. I'd make a fortune if I did. But what I can say is that we do know that something is here, it's real, it's going to make a difference. And if we look at technologies like this in the past that have made a difference, they've generally been beneficial, like Model T Fords or the airplane. Think about the airplane. I mean, the airplane, when it came in 1902, how long did it take it for it to realize its full potential? 30, 40 years. And even, it didn't come out of the First World War even. It was used in the war, but commercial aviation didn't get developed until after the Second World War.
That's my latest conversation with James Heckman, Nobel laureate in economics, on his views about what artificial intelligence could mean for our society. In the conversation we had, Professor Heckman reacted to the latest development of U.S. tariffs against the rest of the world. One could also argue many of these theories are only temporary.
Correct.
Vis-a-vis economic realities.
Correct.
Particularly right now, Professor, if I could suggest an example, tariff
Yes.
has in a way challenged economists about what exactly is the right way to develop the economy, especially economies when they're working together.
You notice Trump recently relaxed tariffs on coffee, avocados, and tomatoes. Why? Because the price of coffee went up 25%. his argument is deranged, but his argument is particularly deranged by saying, if we put up a tariff, we'll make it here in the U.S. and get more jobs. His idea is to somehow protect the U.S. against trade from other countries, and what trade does is it lowers the welfare of the United States. Every calculation suggests that the trade with China in particular was benefiting the United States and China both. But the point is that this theory is received a test. It's not just the theory. So now Trump sees the coffee price going up 25%. Well, it's a tax. There's no question about it. If these ignoramuses want to, and they read, there's a paper by a guy at MIT named Otter. It's called the China Shock. And so what they're doing is saying, oh, look, where they were competing directly with China, and China basically came in at lower price, those industries declined. And the workers specialized to that industry were hurt. That's all true. But what's not true is that the whole net effect of trade with China was made people worse. Because the price of imported goods fell. There's something called the Walmart effect, which is basically goods were imported that poorer people are actually using. Yeah. These are goods that were more consumed by the lower middle class or middle class and poor people. And those prices went down. There was real gain. On top of that, the intermediate goods that firms were using to start up new plants and new ideas, those were being imported from China, machine tools, this, that, and the other. That was stopped, and that caused real benefit while it was going on, and that's being thwarted. So when you do the calculation correctly, the gains to trade from trade with China and the U.S. were substantial.
Some in the U.S. could argue, and some of its allies as well, well, the U.S. is strong enough. You know, one of the comparative advantage is a market and a consumer, the largest in the world. And as a result, it can negotiate to a tariff rate that it likes. And as a result, what Trump is doing, well, prove eventually.
He didn't do that for coffee. He didn't do that for avocados. He didn't do it for tomatoes. And he's not doing it for anything serious. I think what happened, I think, is true, that there are many countries that were imposing asymmetric tariffs on the U.S. versus what we imposed on them. So in that sense, for example, Canada was imposing certain duties, certain kinds of tariffs on dairy products and so forth and so on. And so that limited American consumers and had a harmful effect. However, the point is that the gains, and by the way, the calculation of what the tariff should be did not in any principal way take into account what the response on the other side would be. There's a theory, and there's a way that economists do this model, these interactions, you know, in games where people are what's called Nash bargaining or else doing some kind of oligopoly play. There was none of that going on. The level of sophistication of this administration is low.
Let me also ask you about the U.S. dollar, Professor, if I could.
Yes.
There has been so much debate, and as you know, many economists are also thinking about alternatives. People are still using U.S. dollar. We are also seeing a strong system based on U.S. dollar, not necessarily going to be easily replaced or take the place of. So what is your assessment of the latest situation, Professor?
I mean, the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency has helped the United States a lot, but it's also hurt at times, in the sense that, you know, we set this price. I mean, think about the time during the Reagan administration and when the U.S. dollar was very highly valued. And so it made U.S. goods expensive relative to other goods. That was a powerful force towards deindustrialization of the U.S. So it made American goods in world trade very expensive. And so the question then becomes, when the U.S. dollar fluctuates in this way as a result of policy proposals and changes, like if U.S. had really gone bankrupt, if we'd actually stayed and the government shut down for a longer period of time and wasn't honoring the bills, then at some point the dollar would, what's the value of the dollar? One part of the value of the dollar is the credibility of the U.S. And that would have been lost if we had stopped, if we'd continued and stopped really guaranteeing
the credibility of the United States.
The credibility of the United States and the credibility of the dollar,
yeah.
Exactly, and the treasury bills and so forth.
Professor, you have been and advocate for early childhood education.
I have, yes.
You have been working with your Chinese colleagues, peers, and counterparts.
Yes, I have.
For a plan here in this country, which
Yes.
has turned out to be a national plan and national implementation.
Yes.
How would you assess the current result?
I would say the pilots have been very successful, and I would say going forward, if the implementation follows the design that's been used in the past, it's going to be successful.
Yeah. What about demographics and youth unemployment?
Yes.
How do you see these issues become ever more important for emerging economies and developing economies?
Well, there's something, actually, another project of mine, which you don't know about, and I'm writing a book on the worldwide population decline. I've organized a group of scholars around the world. So we have people in all around the world, including in China, but also people in Hungary, in England, in Germany, of course, the U.S. and Canada, and Japan. And so it's a general trend. The only part of the world where population growth is positive is going to be Africa and some Muslim countries in Asia. Pakistan, Indonesia are still growing. And I think also, I don't even think Saudi Arabia is growing. It could be, I'm not sure about that. But in Africa, Tunisia is not growing either. But generally, in Africa, there's a lot of growth. But even there, what you found is that the population growth rates have declined. So even in Africa, the large families are declining.
So what does that mean, and what can be the economic policies to work with that?
Well, most people focus on the welfare state and say, look, especially Western Europe, the focus is the way the welfare state's been configured is we're going to tax the young to support the old, and there'll be more young than old, so we earned a dividend by having more kids. And so when the baby boom was very active in many countries, it was a very good idea. You could tax a lot of young people and very few dependents. Now China is declining in size, no longer the biggest country in the world. But even India, you realize, rural India is declining in terms of the population size.
So what does it mean for us?
What it means for you,
suggestions.
The welfare state as it's currently configured has to be reconsidered. The idea that you're going to have these general taxes on the young to support the old, you're going to have to think more generally about how that's going to work. And so the nature of the Social Security systems. And the other part is that we have to be realistic, which many countries are not, about the fact that in most of these countries, people are living longer. And because they're living longer, then the burden on the state is going to be higher. And they're not only living longer, they're healthier, which means the age at which they retire should probably go up. It should not go down. So you saw the fight that went on in France about that. And in many countries where you have very vested welfare states and unions, these groups, this is where democracy is very weak. We're getting then essentially the notion that these groups will try to milk the rest of the population to support them in their old age. So I think the politics of these countries has to be carefully examined. But then we also have to raise the question, I mean, is this mean that the way democracy, Western democracies and welfare states are configured means that there's a fatal flaw, especially with the declining fertility? You're not going to have people to support the old age. You're not going to support this state. And then in places like Hungary, there's another issue that goes on about national identity. But that's not the general issue. The general issue is the support of the older. And so I think we need different policies and different taxes, though.